Hello and welcome to the Horror Track here at ConTinual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and today we are talking about building the story and the scares in our series on how to construct horror. But before we dive into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Tim.
I'm Tim Waggoner. I've published around 50 novels, 7 short story collections, 3-time winner of the Bram Stoker Award, and I've been teaching creative writing for about 30 years.
All right, Gini.
I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Dog Books, and I write under a variety of pen names and in all lengths and genres. And as J.C. Koch, I write horror.
Rachel.
I am Rachel Brune, and I am the founder and editor at Chrome Girls Press. We specialize in anthologies, so I love horror short stories and novellas and anything that is scary and short. And I've crammed a bunch of awesome, scary short stories into 4 full-length anthologies and a couple of short mini anthologies. And we've got some more coming out this year.
Nice. Lisa.
No, it's fine. Of course. I'm Elle Marie Wood, better known as Lisa, because you're going to hear that, I promise you. I'm a psychological horror author. I've published 6 novels and written over 200 short stories, screenplays, poetry, and I teach creative writing and composition for, golly, I hate to date that, about 15 years. Tim, why did you make me think about my years?
Sorry about that.
And I'm Gail C. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy with a lot of scary stuff because I tend to like necromancers and ghosts and spooky things. And as Morgan Bryce, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance with a lot of spooky things and ghosts because I like everything paranormal. So might just tiptoe up to the edge of horror, but I've been told that I have kept people from sleeping well at night, so I'll claim it. All right, we've talked about different elements of building a horror story over the course of several of these panels, but when it really comes down to thinking about the story and planning in where the scary parts go, how does it work for you? Do you already have some scenes in mind and you have to, work out the story to figure out where that goes? Or do you surprise yourself or maybe even scare yourself as it develops? Ginny.
I do a little of all of that. In book 13 in the Alien series, Camp Alien, there's a very large scene set at a basically creepy, disgusting, haunted former mental asylum. And when my editor was going over it, she was like, this just seems so over the top. I'm like, this is a real place and I'm underselling it. And she's like, oh, then by all means, let's have more. I'm like, all that stuff about the shoes repiling themselves? Yeah. So she's like, just to have some characters refer to the fact that it's a real place. So we did that. And I, like I like to say, Stephen King's the most scared man in America. Many things frighten me. I can be, if danger is coming, I'm your girl. But if it's, creepy, I'm just afraid of the dark. I'm terrified of snakes. Clowns are right after it, right? I'm afraid of a lot of things. So it's really easy for me to just pull that up and go, well, what would creep me out in this moment? Oh, something right on the side of my eye. Like, yes, that would creep me out. A weird sound. So it's easy. I just put myself in the character's place. If the characters need to be scared and what would scare them. And then in a lot of my horror, I'm writing it from the monster's viewpoint. So it's usually more the human reaction to the monster or the monster's realization that it's a way better creature than the humans that I think causes the scare. But I like Elle, I like to do more psychological. So there's, creepy chittering and all this other stuff, and everybody else is acting really normal. And your POV character is like, what's going on? What are you talking about? I like stuff like that. So.
Okay. Rachel.
So for me, as a reader, horror is building suspense, and it is instigating fear and getting that adrenaline going with unanswered questions. Because a lot of times our fear is unanswered questions. If we know what something is in the dark, it's not as scary.
Mm-hmm.
If it's one of the most unnerving experiences I've had was stepping with my bare foot on something that moved. And it was still gross. You know, it turned out it was a North Carolina cockroach. That was gross. But at the same time, in that split second of, oh my God, what is this? It's moving. That was worse than when I turned on the light. I was like, okay, that's gross and I don't like it, but now I know what it is. So for me, fear and horror is when the author's raising these questions and pushing the story forward, and I'm reading because I absolutely have to know what that is. And sometimes the best stories don't answer that question.
Well, and to be fair, for those who may not be acquainted with exactly what a North Carolina or a Southern cockroach is, they're pretty darn big. So these are not little tiny ones here. Big one.
Arizona has them too, and they fly.
Yeah, I've seen them out in Arizona and Texas.
And they fly. Yeah.
These are sizable things to step on. Let's just clarify that. Rachel is not just being a lightweight here.
I didn't need to hear about them flying. I'm just telling you. I didn't need to hear that.
They used to get into my house in Phoenix. They'd get in the house. And it was always late at night when I was up writing and everybody else was asleep. And so one of the cats would work with me and I'd bang, we had two skylights and that's inevitably where they'd go, right? So I'd have to get a broom and I'd bang it down and then the cat would kill it. Oh. It was teamwork and it worked well because she knew mommy wants that thing dead. Right?
Yeah. And my cats don't help me like that. They play with it and look at it and I'm like, kill it! What's your problem? What are you doing?
Dad, I'm staring through the house holding the cat up going, what's your problem? Smack it. Al, how about you?
Oh, you said me? I'm sorry. You traumatized me. I'm stuck on the flying. I'm like, oh, I can't even. Barely remember the question. I've got the flying cockroach in my head. I think I do a mix of all of it. I think sometimes the scare is the thing that makes me want to write the story. So I have this really cool idea for the spooky thing. And I'm like, I got to put it somewhere. So I come up with a story. But often I really like to be, as a pantser, I really, really like to be surprised, you know, and I always frighten myself, of course. I mean, I think horror authors we're just a chicken lot. That's it. We just, because the best horror is the stuff that actually gets a reaction, right? You can talk all day about, I don't know, Ferris wheels, and they don't frighten me. They don't frighten a lot of people. Some people, yes, but not most. And so that's not going to get any sort of reaction. But if I talk about the things that do frighten me, I can actually pour a little more passion into the piece. And it's frightening. It's terrifying for me. And so the hope is that it's terrifying for somebody else. But yeah, I think it's always a combination. But I think from a pantser's perspective, definitely there's this surprise myself moment. So the story sort of fleshes itself out. And then I've got the scary thing happening. And then I'm sitting there sort of writing what I'm envisioning at the moment. And it's invigorating, but it's creepy at the same time.
I don't know. I have been on some pretty darn terrifying Ferris wheels at rickety county fairs that might not have been properly maintained. So I'm reserving judgment on that.
That's a good idea. Good point.
Rattle when they go around. You're going, did I make a wise life choice by getting on this?
My husband doesn't even care if it's rickety. It could be the nicest looking Ferris wheel, but he is using a lot of courage to go in it. He's afraid of heights.
Story idea, folks. Take it. Ferris wheels.
We've got a creepy carnival open submission.
I was just going to say, Rachel, we all want in on the creepy carnival. We all want in on the creepy carnival anthology that's coming out of this because I find everything about a carnival to be creepy.
Ooh. Yeah, my husband hates Ferris wheels too. Even the big enclosed pod ones like the Eye in London. No, too high. That's not going to fly. I think for me, layering in the scares is kind of a combination because some of the things I know will be atmospheric and enhance it. When you're the one setting up the haunted house and you're placing the fog machine and you're putting the glow in the dark, creepy marks on the walls, you know where the scares are, you know where the jump scares are. So it's not as scary. But when you turn out the light and you walk through it, you can appreciate your handiwork and go, okay, that's effective. So I kind of do mine in layers, and I'll start with what would creep me out in this situation and what are some of the common fears that I know will creep other people out. And I think the the highest compliment I got on the spookiness of one of my stories was the late Carol Nelson Douglas had read it and emailed me and said, "Thanks a lot. I read it before bedtime and I had to sleep with the light on." It's like,
That's awesome.
I'm sorry that I scared you, Carol, but I actually scared Carol. Wow. So yeah, it's a combination for me. How about you, Tim?
You know, it is a combination. I think you make a good point about it. It's hard to be scared, you know, when you're creating it, but I build it out of things that scare me. So like if I was going to do the rickety not roller coaster, but the Ferris wheel, because that's the first thing I thought of too. It's what I would do is if I had to write about a scary roller coaster, what things about them bother me? And the rickety thing has bothered me. The fact that the safety bar may be really thin, maybe the seat, it feels like you could slip on it because it's a little too slick. And then I might start exaggerating it too to make it dreamlike, because I often write stuff like that. So I remember being a kid and just being amazed at how high up I was going. So what if you just kept going up, like the Ferris wheel keeps going like this, and so you're just going up and up and up, and I could do all kinds of things with that. And I don't really get scared through the writing of it. Like I say, building it from something that scares me, you know, works pretty good. I try to focus on the anticipation. I try to focus too. I think a big part of horror is loss of control. So a Ferris wheel works great because there's nothing you can do on that damn thing. You are stuck on it and you are at its mercy. You know, there's no driver's wheel, there's no brake, there's no nothing. So I try to think about in terms of what would make a character feel that kind of loss of control in terms of the details that I put in. And then I also try to do the unknown by only putting in a few things. So, you know, if I had a monster, I'd rather describe it by like a flash of a few impressions or images. I mean, if you run across something in the wild in the woods and you didn't know what it was, it's not going to stand there and, you know, let you kind of like sketch it like one of these wildlife artists. You know, you're going to get whatever impressions you get. You're going to be scared. You're going to run. It's going to move, whatever. And so I try to think of like what sort of like very fast impressions might somebody get. And I also like stories that don't explain things all the time, because that doesn't happen in real life. Most of the things that happen in life, I don't know why they happen. I'm not sure what they mean. I'm never sure if I do know why they happen, if they really happen for that reason. And I think it's a lot more realistic, and it keeps up that feeling of a loss of control, and you kind of give it to your reader by that point. You don't give them the tools of control if you don't explain everything.
Okay. So as you're creating the story to the horror, which comes first, the story, the ideas for the scary bits in your mind? Does one feed the other? How does this work for you, Rachel?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
All of the above. It really goes from story to story. If it's a short story, and it's because short stories, I tend to spend less time agonizing over the characters and the plot and just go play with it, because they're a lot easier to fix if you go off in the wrong direction for a couple of words or pages. For like, I'm about to attempt my very first horror novel, and I'm spending a lot of time with the main character, to answer some of those questions. So yeah, it really is, it's a terrible answer, but it really does depend on the project and how the idea originally comes to me.
Okay. Elle?
I mean, again, I don't think there's a way to pinpoint it, because it is different every time you sit down and write. You know, with short stories, I really don't focus a lot, like at all. As a pantser, it's difficult to say that in a room full of people, and I don't know that you all are all plotters, but it's whoever's watching that's a plotter might find that difficult to understand. But I could go outside right now, or just here, you know, if anyone who comes away from this conversation and wants to write about Ferris wheels, you know, because you've just felt like that's what's happening, you may just write it right away and get, you know, just have this frenzy of words and get done in a couple hours. And it's not like you sat and thought about, you know, what I'm going to write this carnival theme, or I'm going to think about this character, or a conversation sparked the thoughts. And so you go with it. So in this instance, maybe you were just given this one little hint of something, but we don't know what the scary thing might be. It might not even be on that Ferris wheel. I just kind of go with what I feel. And that's like, it's truly a pantsing trait. And I've always been a pantser. Like, I mean, I would get in trouble in school because I was like, I don't care what you said, there's an outline due. I'm not doing the outline. I'm doing the outline. It's horrible. And so I definitely understand that it's like when it comes, you write it, like or you say something and like speak into your phone and send yourself a note. There's sticky notes everywhere in here. You can't see that. I try to give you the nice view. You don't need to see the rest. And, you just kind of go. And so therefore, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what comes first. I would guarantee you that nothing ever comes first the same way every single time. So I just kind of write whenever. Novel, short story, screenplay, doesn't really matter to me. Whatever it is. And it's funny, I could go outside, get inspired by something I saw in the front yard, come back in and sit down and not know what I'm writing yet. Screenplay, poem, novel, short story, don't know. Just writing something because here it is. And I'll figure it out along the way. It won't take too long, but I'll get there. I just kind of go with it.
Okay, fair enough. I usually have the basics of the plot in mind, and maybe the big reveal scare, the climactic battle, the turning point scare, something like that. But I will also, just start writing to the outline and realize as I'm going, they're talking for a long time, or nothing much has really happened here. And I'll put notes into myself. And I'm reminded of that, I think, Raymond Chandler quote that if all else fails, have somebody run into the room with a gun. So I'll leave myself notes here like, need something ghostly here. Got to kill someone here. And that usually ups the action quotient and gets away from just people having long conversations over coffee. Or I'll go back and read what I thought was a scary scene and go, I must have been tired. That's not scary at all. Let's go back and put in some stuff here because this is really sleepy. Let's fix this. So it kind of depends. How about you, Tim?
Often when I'm working on whether it's a short story or novel, I'll go to the Notepad app on my phone and go through all the stuff I've written down. A lot of times I'll just write down weird images. Sometimes they're thoughts. Sometimes they're like things I hear, a phrase that I think is just interesting. Sometimes it's just something weird that I see. And I'll pull that out, and then I'll go ahead and I'll look for some other item on there that it's not that weird or scary, that doesn't relate to it. And then I try to pick some kind of emotional core to put in there. And then I try to kind of weave these things together so they make sense. And at that point, if it's a short story, I may or may not outline it because it's short. A novel, I usually outline to a certain degree, even if I never look at the outline again when I write it, just so I have a sense of where I'm going. And along the way, I've written so many, I've been a horror fan all my life, so I like breathe the rhythms of a horror story. So I don't really have a whole lot of problem moving in. It's like, okay, time to scare this part up and time to scare that part up. And I'm always thinking about where can I make something more suspenseful? Where can I have there be more conflict? And if necessary, I'll do the same thing like you were talking about, where I'll say, put this in later and I'll come back to it and do that. But overall, it seems to work pretty good. Although I do find like short stories, my brain kind of cramps working on them because it's like, I would like to do more. I'm like, I need a bigger canvas. And I feel like I'm sometimes, painting on like a little postage stamp size canvas. But it all seems to work out in the end, I guess, just like Lisa was talking about.
Okay, Ginny.
Lisa and I were separated at birth. I was just like, I have nothing to add to that because that is exactly what it's like. I don't start. I do some work from hire, and I'm still so utterly, utterly grateful that so far the editors I've worked with are really happy to take what I would consider a back cover blurb as my outline. Because outlining to me, that's part of being a linear writer, is you want the surprise. If I know everything that's going to happen, it's not going to surprise anybody. If it doesn't surprise me even a little, it's not going to surprise anybody else. So for me, it's just like Lisa. I now have like 15 carnival stories running around in my brain because I'm like, really, really, Rachel, we need to do that anthology we're in, right? Because we talked about it, and now I've got all this creepy stuff going around in my head. And like Lisa said, you sit down and you write it, because that's what linear writers do. We don't plot, we don't outline, we don't do that stuff. It's like, yeah, there you go. And sometimes it's a scene, and sometimes it's a chapter, And sometimes it's an actual complete story, and sometimes it's an actual complete novel. But I have a lot of stuff that it's like, okay, I have the scene. I have no idea what I'm doing with the scene, but the scene is there for when I finally know what I'm doing with it. And then I go on to something else. But in terms of how it's a little bit of everything. I mean, just like Tim said, I mean, I edit as I go, and I go back. It's like, is there enough? And like you and Tim, Gail and Tim were saying, is there enough conflict? Is there enough scare? Is this actually frightening? Is it actually funny when I go back? Is it actually anything? Is it boring? Oh my God, it's boring, right? And then that has to get cut and changed around. So it's really a process once you get in there, and everybody's process is just a little bit different. You just have to do what works for you. But like I said, I'm doing pretty much, including I don't know what it is, with my sister that was taken from me at birth. So, because it's the exact same thing. It's like we're sharing a brain on that.
Seriously, though.
Well, now we hear a lot about the beats of a story. Tim mentioned the rhythms of a story. How does that factor into where the scares go? Whether those are reveals or jump scares or near misses or glimpses of the thing in the fog. What are your beats for those scary points, Lisa?
You would say, don't ask the pantser that. There's no beat. There are beats, right? Yeah, there's rules, but we break all the rules anyway. So anywhere I want them to be. I mean, I could literally start the book with someone scaring the mess out of everyone, and we haven't even gotten 3 sentences in. I've done that. I like it. It's good. I like that. You know, I like to start right in the middle of the action, and often something crazy has just happened. So there are, I mean, you know, when you're, and that's the thing. I want to, as a pantser, I want to be clear, I want to make sure that people who may not necessarily know that they're a pantser, but don't necessarily relate to the planning level, and there's different degrees of it, please know, of a plotter, but there are rules, but you know, not every single rule has to be adhered to. And if you are a pantser, finding beats and adhering to beats is not something you're going to do. You will not be able to force yourself into that ever. Like, it just won't happen. And because if you do, you change your own rhythm, you change your own style, and it feels forced. It won't feel good to you. It won't look good on the paper. Doesn't mean it won't be a good story for someone, but you as the author will not have enjoyed that writing. I'm just going to be clear about it if you're forcing yourself into that, right? So the answer for me is the beats are anywhere I want them to be. Literally. I do not adhere to any structural rules whatsoever.
Okay.
Short of there needing to be a beginning, middle, and end, short of that, I don't adhere to any structural rules whatsoever.
Okay. Tim, what's your take on that?
A lot of it has just kind of been, you know, it's like when you first learn to hit a ball in Little League and they teach you, you know, grab the bat here, choke up, stand at the plate, put your feet here, do this. And eventually you do it enough times and, you know, it's in your muscle memory. And then you start thinking in terms of like, I don't know, it's almost like a Zen thing in a lot of ways. So I don't, you know, put out beats or anything like that. I couldn't even tell you exactly what the hell a beat was because I hear people talk about it all the time and I'm not sure anybody has a real clear definition of it. And for me, I usually think of stories, horror stories, as, first of all stories are stories of people in pain, because even if it's just they want something, they lack. So I try to think about what kind of pain my character might be experiencing along through the whole scene or whatever, or the story. And I think of it in terms of, you know, first there's an awareness that something's wrong. Then there's anticipation of whatever it is that's coming. And then there's the confrontation with it. And then then there may or may not be an aftermath, depending on if it's a short story or a novel or whatever, or a scene in a novel. And it's not, and that can be very fast. It could take the whole book if you want to do it that way. And I don't really think in terms of like labeling that. I don't like write it out and say, this is what it is. It's more like I reverse engineered how I do that in order to explain it to people. But it seems to work pretty well for me. And so that's kind of like, I guess, if I had to, you know, put together like a scary scene pattern, that's the way I do it, I guess.
Okay. Jenny.
I actually have an answer for this one that is on the beat. Because my first love is mysteries, and because I doused myself in mysteries for my, you know, all my formative years, and I still love mysteries today. the mystery has a distinct build. You meet your friend, there's a little crime, and then it goes up, and then there's a big crime, and then you come down, and then it goes up, there's a big crime, and then it goes up. And depending on how long your book is, each hill has to be a little higher. Each crime has to be a little worse. It has, you found a dead body, and then it's a dead body of somebody we now know who's a character, and that kind of thing. So I actually kind of automatically write on a mystery build, but I also write in a thriller style, which is short chapters with cliffhanger endings. And I taught myself to do that because I realized I didn't want to read the ridiculously long chapters I was writing. And I thought, if I don't want to read these this long, no one wants to read these this long. So I write with a mystery build and a thriller style, regardless of genre. That said, I'm also still with Elle and with Tim in that when that first mystery kill happens, varies. Usually I want it early, but some stories it doesn't belong early. Some stories you actually have to set your scene and get people kind of comfortable with your characters and sort of insinuate something's going on, and then boom, then the hit. But I like the ever ratcheting hill up, and then you have your last hill is your penultimate moment, and then there is the denouement slide down where Poirot or whoever is explaining to everybody in the drawing room what actually happened, and then you have your coda at the end of everybody how they're happily living after. It's easier to do in a novel than in a short story, but the mystery build still works in a short story because many mysteries are short stories. So I just like to keep it. You may not have as many hills in a short story. You may only get like 2, right? You've got your first crime and then some clues and then your bigger crime and then you figure it out. So I like that build, and it's a build for somebody aspiring who's like, I don't know what I do and I don't know what I write. I really recommend doing a little study on a mystery build, because that, whether it's comfortable for you or not, that is exactly what Lisa said. If it feels like you're shoehorning yourself in, that's different. For me, it's very comfortable because I grew up with it. But I think a mystery build is a really great foundation for you to start with, especially if you're not really sure what you're doing.
Okay. Rachel, how do you do it?
So as I'm sitting here and I'm listening to everybody, I'm realizing maybe I am a little bit more of a plotter than I realized, because I really do spend a lot of time writing in my head. And then when I sit down to write, even a short story even if it starts out on the page as this idea, eventually as I write, I'm going to be adding things to it. And if I'm stuck, I have to walk away. I can't write my way through being stuck. I go away, I start working it through my head, and then eventually I come back with the idea that I need to get through that stuck part. And so for me, I'm very, very comfortable with things like your inciting incident, the middle, here we go. I'm like, I like to take those and take a look at, okay, how am I going to push my characters? Because I'm very nice and I won't push them if I don't have to. So I remind myself, no, you have to push your characters, especially since it's horror. They don't really get a break. And when I'm reading horror, I'm not really thinking beats. I'm thinking it's more like waves, right? It's more like if you're surfing a wave, or if you're riding up a pretty hilly hill. You've got the uphill or the downhill, wherever you're going, then it evens out for a little bit, and then you've got some more hill. And a good horror story will push you through those places. And I think it goes back to a little bit of what I was saying about those unanswered questions. We are, like you said, that the sketch, you're not going to see a whole Bigfoot, right? He's not just going to sit there and be like, yeah, sure, take my picture. But you may see some, a dead animal in the woods that something was feasting on. Or you may wake up from a dream and there's footprints around you in the woods. And all of that will push forward because I'm going to keep reading. I want to know what the heck is out there in the woods. Thank you, Stephen King, the girl who loved Tom Gordon. that book is basically this girl walking through the woods, and I couldn't put it down because I needed to know what the heck else was in the woods with her, and if she was going to get out, and what was going to happen at the end. Like, there's no way you're going to put that book down. And again, it's literally one character, but again, you're pushing. Beats, yes. There's the inciting incident where she goes off and suddenly she's lost. And then you have the middle part as things slowly get worse and worse. And then, of course, you have the climax and the denouement. So, yeah, you could go through and you could analyze that story and find beats in it. And you could use those beats in your own writing. And especially for beginner writers, for newer writers like myself, I say, yeah, go and do that. But understand that when you put them all together, there's those waves and those questions that are pushing you through the narrative, not letting you rest until you get to the end.
Okay. So what is the scariest thing you've ever read and the scariest thing you've ever written? Tim?
Oh man, you had to start with me. Probably the scariest thing I ever read was in Salem's Lot. I was in 7th grade when it came out, and I never read anything like it. You know, the intensity of it might not seem that way to people who read it today, but back then it sure was. And it was, I think, when the character Ben Mears remembers being a kid going into the Marsden house, and he knows that Hubie Marston has hung himself there, and he imagines that he sees him there, and just the way that was described, I thought that was so scary. And probably on a parallel with that is also like in the Stand, where people have to go through the tunnel. I forget which one it is in New York, but it's full of bodies and it's full of cars jammed in there, and there's nothing in it. There's nothing to be afraid of, but it's so terrifying the way it was written. In terms of the scariest scene I ever wrote, I don't honestly, I don't know. I don't think of my stuff as scary like that. Usually the hardest stuff that I write is because I often build my short stories, especially from real parts of my life. And so reliving like anything that might be emotionally difficult, or if I lived through it, was scary at the time. Those things always scare me. I just don't think back to them and say, oh, this was the story, where I did something that scared me the most. Sometimes the scariest thing for me is to reveal something, about myself, even if people are never going to know that it's from deep inside myself, or maybe from a place of shame or guilt or whatever. So I guess it's more like a type of thing I write that scares me probably than a specific scene.
Okay. Jenny?
I'm a great big grown-up girl and going to join the Stephen King train. His long fiction doesn't actually work for me at all, but his short fiction, oh my dear God. The Night Shift collection in general, but the Boogeyman in specific. I'm a great big grown-up girl, and I still cannot, to this day, be in a room, any room, where doors open just a crack. It has to be wide open or closed shut, because if it's just a crack, that's how the Boogeyman gets you. And I literally still cannot do it. So that's the thing that scared me the most. Of the things that I've written that are scary, the temptation to say my Lovecraftian stuff, but more of that is really doing a comparison between monsters and humans. So while there's scary stuff in it, I'm focused more on the higher morality that the monsters have than the humans have. But the scene I talked about at the start in Camp Alien, when they're in that haunted, creepy asylum, I have had readers say, that scared me. That was really creepy. I was reading that going, oh my God, what are they going to hit next, right? Keeping in mind that the Alien series is A, science fiction, and B, funny. But that place is creepy, and I had that side up. That place is legitimately horrific. And so writing all the stuff about it was reasonably easy, but my characters are just completely, they have to get through it. People are being held captive here that they have to find and rescue. It's just, there's just a lot of on that. So based on what fans have told me, that's probably the scariest thing I've written.
Okay. Rachel?
The scariest thing I've read is a toss-up. I mean, I could sit here all day long and tell you about stuff that creeped me out. But when I was little, I think it was around the 5th grade, I read Rats in the Walls, Lovecraft's Rats in the Walls, and Poe's The Mask of the Red Death. And that's why I'm the way I am today. But both of those were like, they were terrifying and they were wonderful. And then I read, then I went on to read Ray Bradbury's stories, The Veldt, which just gets scarier and scarier as I get older. And so, yeah, that fiction, that's what gets me. I could go on, but Shirley Jackson, I still have her collected short stories, and I've only read a few of them because they're disturbing. As far as stuff that I've written, again, I'm on the same boat as I wrote it to be scary, but I'm never really sure if it is, because when I read horror, I nowadays don't really get scared by it. I get an adrenaline rush, or I get an emotional reaction, but that emotional reaction isn't always fear. In fact, it's mostly not fear. I just read it because, to me, horror takes a lot of risks that you don't find in other genres. And so I don't really have something I can point to and be like, yeah, this is the most super creepy thing that I've ever written. But I do have strong emotional reactions from readers to my short stories. But yeah, that's... stop there. Let me stop there before I go blah, blah, blah.
And Lisa?
Well, so the scariest thing that I've ever read, and remember, guys, I'm a psychological horror author, so it's not going to be it's going to be, well, I'll just say it. So, Beloved by Toni Morrison. It's scary on a lot of levels, but the scene where we find why she killed one child and was trying to kill the others. And when you're trying to just deal with the fact of why she was doing this. And as a mom, I was like, yeah, I totally get it. Right. And I say that, so that means you should read it. If you look at me and go, oh, no, read it, you'll see what I mean. Right. But then the description of her trying to kill the other ones tore me apart. Because I fully understood what she was doing. I just don't know that I could do it, but damn me if I don't do it, and I felt like, wow, this is the scariest thing. And it wasn't it wasn't the fear of, oh Lord, this mother's killed a child, or it wasn't the fear of, I mean, of course there are creepy moments when, Beloved, I don't want to give it all away, but for people who do want to read it, but there's creepy moments where you have your traditional ghost scare. And there's creepy moments, when you're dealing with murder. And it was relatively brutal because of just the moment that we had, in the book to do this thing. But the fact that, I know what pain she felt when she didn't actually succeed in killing those other ones. And that's terrifying because I would hate to be put in that position. So I felt it. I felt it on a visceral level. I really, really did. It disturbed me. I don't normally have reactions to books. Like many of us, we write this stuff. It takes a lot to scare me. But I was sitting there like, my gosh. So that's that one. The piece that I've written that's scariest is Telecommuting, and that's a relatively new one, but it's based upon someone who's working from home, and it was in the middle of our worldwide moment, if you will, and but the working from home aspect could be outside of the worldwide moment. It really literally could be done at any time, and in fact, it's funny because it came out during the worldwide moment, but it had literally nothing to do with, we all know with book publishing, books take forever to publish. This thing was out and waiting to be published when everything happened. And I'm like, guys, it's not connected. Anyway, so, but what that person sees from their desk, the vantage point of their desk, because I, like the fool that I am, wrote it based upon my vantage point. And so it's a little bit on the nose in some spots. And I just I'm looking at it like I should never have done that, because at 3 a.m, I'm seeing the same spot. And it's terrifying. But the good thing is I've given it, obviously have beta readers beforehand. I'm like, what do you think? And that point comes up to them as well. And they don't know my vantage point. So I'm like, okay, at least it's not just me scaring myself. It's actually a good scene. But yikes, man, I can identify that a little bit too easily. And it scares me every time I even think about. I don't read that when I'm doing readings because I'm just like, not that hard, no.
for me, the one that still sticks in my mind is the scariest thing I read. And part of it, of course, is the age that I read it. But I had gotten the book Jane Emily by Patricia Clapp in my Scholastic Book Fair box. And the crux of it is a willful, spoiled girl whose spirit goes into a garden gazing ball and causes all kinds of problems for the people that were left behind. And I have always given gazing balls a side eye since reading that book. It just really stuck with me, even though I think I've read things that were technically a lot scarier, but boy, that one just stuck in my mind. Out of my own stuff, I would say Sons of Darkness, which is the first in the Night Vigil series. That's probably my grittiest dark urban fantasy. And it's a ex-priest and a former FBI agent who hunt demons in northwestern Pennsylvania. And the particular set of demons that they're running into in this case are grief demons that manifest and take advantage of the different emotions in the 5 stages of grief. And so you have somebody who absolutely refuses to accept that their spouse is dead, although the decomposing body is in their recliner. They're still bringing the meals, and sort of they don't see them. They are completely oblivious to it because of the influence. And we're all, if you've gone through the 5 stages of grief for significant loss, that's not too far off the mark in some ways. And so I was playing with a lot of different things when I wrote that, and that one's, I think, the scariest that I've written and has some of the most horrific elements. Tim, I think I started this question with you, right?
Yes.
Or no? Okay.
Yes, you did.
Well, that means I start with Ginny on the final thing, which is we have blown through our time, so please let us know where we can find you. And if you have something recent, upcoming, or out now, let us know.
Okay, you can find me at www.ginikoch.com. I am on Facebook, and I have several different author pages on Facebook as well. I'm on Twitter. I am on Pinterest. It looks like I'm on Instagram. I'm not. Someone's swearing that they're going to drag me on, though. So, watch that space. But don't send me any messages until. And the next release I have upcoming is an anthology. I'm in Predator: Eyes of the Demon. Speaking of scary, but that keeps getting shoved back. And now, which is kind of nice, there's a new Predator movie coming out, releasing on Hulu. And the anthology is going to drop right around the same time that comes out. So now I think it's November. I'm not sure, but it's coming. I swear, and you can pre-order it, and please do.
Okay, Rachel.
So with Crone Girls Press, we just released a mini anthology, Objectified. It's 3 novellas of cursed objects with a side dash of feminism. So we take on a couple of different topics and themes. In that one, the authors are terrific, if I do say so myself. You can get that on Amazon, Kindle Unlimited. And then I just released The Amazing Stories of Detective Boudreaux and Sergeant Woodson, which is 3 steampunk novellas. They are very much on the dark side of things. They're mysteries, there's some intrigue and daring do. And it all takes place in the neutral city of New Orleans after the Civil War ends in a ceasefire. And then upcoming sometime this year, Cold Run, which is a werewolf secret agent thriller type of novel, will be out from Falstaff.
Okay, Lisa.
Well, I just released my first dark romance with, how do I call it? Okay, that's what I'm saying. Dark romance. But it also has science fiction and horror elements, and it's called The Tryst. It literally just came out a couple weeks ago. Lots of fun. You can find me at www.elmariewood.com, and you'll find out about all these things I'm about to mention. But I have a project coming out with Falstaff soon in the summer. It'll be kind of neat. It's a novella and a short story collection that is traditional horror, which is not my usual. Like I said, psychological horror is me, and this one is a little different for me, but it's a lot of fun. And in October, my the 3rd book in the trilogy, The Realm, is coming out, and that'll be mid-October. Hopefully And hopefully the pre-order will go up in the summer. I'm kind of excited about that, but I'm sort of sad at the same time because that's the last book in the trilogy. And I'm like, I didn't even know I wanted to write a series. And now that I have, I'm like, it can't be over. Like I keep trying to figure out how to make another one, but whatever, it's not happening. Third book in the trilogy comes out in October. And that's going to be fun. So yeah, elmariewood.com. You'll find all the stuff. Facebook, it's also Elmarie Wood. And on Twitter, it's elmariewood1.
Very good. I'm pretty easy to find online, gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Just search on the name, spell them right, and you'll find me. The new book is an anthology from Fantastic Books called 3 Time Travelers, and each story has 3 time travelers who come together to do something. And mine were Edgar Casey, Harry Houdini, and Margaret Fox of the Fox sisters, who need to steal a painting to change the course of history. So that was a really fun, prompted anthology. And we also will have a new Spell, Salt, and Steel book, House of Cards, coming from Falstaff Books. I just don't have a due date yet. So lots coming up. Of course, the place you can find me the most is here in ConTinual. How about you, Tim?
Well, timwagner.com is the best place to go because it has links to everything. My follow-up to my How to Write Horror book, Writing in the Dark, the Writing in the Dark workbook came out last week. And in July, I have a ghost apocalypse novel called We Will Rise coming out from Flame Tree Press.
Very nice. Well, folks, thank you so much. As always, you've been wonderful, wonderful panelists. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more horror coming up here on ConTinual. So we'll see you online.